Hey everybody, this is the fourth module in our series of the intensive EB-5 guide for investors. And this is probably maybe my most enjoyable module. Why is that? Because we talk about something everybody likes. Getting your money back, right? Getting your money back, getting your permanent green card, and eventually even citizenship. So hopefully this is kind of our rainbow episode out of the EB-5 process. We talked about a lot of the challenges in the previous episodes, and you should be able to get access to those in the description below, where we talked about some of the challenges of EB-5, including timing, selection of projects, proving your source of funds, and the path of funds. This one's going to be our happy video. So bring out the Smurfs and Mickey Mouse and let's get down to business. Once again, my name is Charles Raether. I'm the managing partner at AmLaw. And today in our episode, we wanted to talk about, okay, when do I get my money back? How do I get my money back? And what are next steps in the immigration process? So in the previous episode, I briefly touched upon getting your money back. The investment cycle really varies project to project. Average is about 4 years. Rural projects tend to have longer investment cycles. There may be 5, 6, 7 years. Urban projects tend to be shorter, maybe 3.5 years, 4 years. But as we discussed in our earlier module, if you're investing in an urban project, you're probably going to have to wait 2 to 3 years to get your approval, as opposed to a rural project where you could get it as quickly as 1 year. Once you've got, let's assume you've got your first green card, and here's some kind of crazy scenarios or questions that people always ask. It might be of relevance to you too. First question is, what happens if I get divorced? Unfortunately, yeah, divorces happen, and when you're dealing with projects such as EB-5, where it takes 3, 4, 5, 6 years, life changes occur. Sometimes people split up, and how would that affect things? If you've both received your initial green card, your conditional green card, but you've yet to file for the permanent, you're still eligible. The spouse who was not the primary applicant, it was still eligible to file for a permanent green card, provided that you meet, several requirements. Although those requirements are generally, quite straightforward and not too complicated. So the general rule of thumb is after you've received your conditional green card, if you get divorced, one of the spouses was the main applicant, he or she is not affected by the divorce, nor are the children, but the other spouse would be able to file for the permanent green card irregardless of the divorce. So that's good news, right? Now, what happens if the spouse passes away? And we've had situations like this. We had a situation even where the primary applicant tragically died in a helicopter accident. And those clients, as I recall, they had not yet received the immigrant visa or even the conditional green card. And they had a very challenging situation in that they passed the interview. The consulate confirmed that, everything's okay. We just need some time to do some checks and everything, but it all should be fine. And it was shortly thereafter that the main applicant's spouse tragically died in this accident. From the embassy's perspective, you can see the government's perspective that they're saying, hey, look, you guys did not even receive the first green card. The remaining spouse and dependents are not eligible because, the green card was never even issued to anybody, much less the primary applicant. We filed an appeal. It took a long time, gosh, I think maybe several years, but they got the approval. We were able to make convincing arguments as to why it should have been, the conditional green card should have been issued, and they eventually agreed to that. So that was a very unique situation. Obviously, if you're in a different situation where the green cards have already been issued and you've been living with them for some period of time, it should not be a large problem or a very significant problem to get the permanent green card then issued for everybody thereafter if you've actually gotten the first one. So it's a little bit morbid. We wouldn't like talking about these things, but things like that do come up. Now, there could be claims as to the return of the funds, where those funds go to if the primary applicant passes away. That's something that's handled by, the state law, and whether the surviving spouse has a right to all those funds, or we've even had a situation where the spouse passed away and his relatives tried to make claims to those funds. But again, we weren't involved with that because that's not really an immigration issue, but some challenges like that could come up. What about traveling and maintaining your status in the U.S.? So let's say you've gotten your green card, doesn't matter, conditional or permanent. How long do you have to be here? How much can you travel? And that's a very good question, especially under the Trump administration. As we know, they're not nearly as, shall we say, forgiving or liberal as their predecessors were. So the general rule of thumb is as follows. As long as you return back to the U.S. within 6 months after your departure, there's generally no problem, right? You can depart up for 6 months at a time, and there should be no issues with you reentering. Now, if you're absent for a period of time more than 6 months, but less than 12 months, then the burden of proof shifts to the person, the traveler, to provide some kind of respectable, decent reason why you were gone for such a long period of time. So it could be, a death in the family, although that might not justify an absence for more than 6 months. And let's say maybe one of your parents passed away and you had to spend a lot of time caring for the other parent. That could be a reasonable explanation. Could be due to medical reasons, either close relatives or even of the actual person, him or herself. So we know medical care is not cheap in America, and a lot of times clients might go overseas where medical care is less expensive. So that could be a reason why you were outside the US for more than 6 months. So there's a number of reasons. I would say health-related, family-related ones, as I mentioned, are generally the easiest ones to use. And if you do have that kind of situation, you just need to bring documentation on your trip when you arrive to the US to show the customs official explaining why you were gone so long. And you need to have documentation from the hospital if you were in the hospital under treatment, or if there was a death in the family, provide proof of the death. Some maybe documentation that you had to care for other family members, et cetera, et cetera. Generally, it's not a problem, again, as long as you're returning back within 12 months. If you're in that bad situation where more than 12 months have passed since you were last in the US, then there most likely will be very big problems, and there's a very high likelihood they will not allow you back in the US. I say high likelihood. We've been successful with clients being able to get back into the US if they've been absent for more than 12 months. But I cannot guarantee to you that would be the case for you if that situation arises. But we've had positive experiences that generally the officers are pretty reasonable. They look at the totality of the circumstances and then make a decision. Now, if you just say, hey, I had a really great job overseas, I didn't want to leave it because I was making such great money, that probably is not going to fly. But as long as you've got some good explanation otherwise why you've been gone for 12 months, I think generally we can put together a good case that you might be able to get back into the US. And please understand, people sometimes confuse this. They look at the green card with the expiration date and they seem to think that is the validity of their residency. So if they had a permanent green card that's valid for 10 years, believe me, that does not mean you can leave the US for 10 years, and as long as that card is not expired. So they're kind of two different things. If you are going to need to be outside of the US for an extended period of time, there's ways to get around that. Either you time your trips, how much time you're spending back and forth, or we can get you what's called a re-entry permit, which will allow you to leave the US, not come back for an extended period of time, sometimes up to a year, sometimes up to 2 years, and you don't have to come back to the US at all during that period of time. And you will be allowed re-entry to the U.S. and you will not sacrifice or lose your residency or green card. Now, the other requirement that I mentioned was, in addition to having to re-enter the U.S. every 6 months, the other thing is you need to spend generally 182 or more days in the U.S. Each calendar year. That requirement is controlled or tracked or enforced less than every 6 months. So every 6 months, that's something they look at more. How much time you're actually spending in the US? Generally, they've been liberal last couple of years or so with Trump. I suspect they're going to become more diligent about enforcing that. And I would say in the past, we've had clients that spent as little as 3 months here a year, 4 months. We had clients who maybe even spent 2 months and they generally did not have any problems. I think that's a bit risky. I think if you're at 4 months here a year or more, you're generally okay. But again, you're subject to the discretion of the officer when you're entering the US, and if he or she thinks you've been gone for too long, even though you've been coming back every 6 months or less, they'll generally let you know. I've never had a case where they just immediately, spontaneously take your green card, annul it without giving you a warning. But if they think you're absent from the US too much, then they will make a comment to you in the airport, and you should heed that comment very closely. And if they say, hey, you need to start spending more time in the US, then that's a clear notice to you, message that you need to spend more time here. And they almost always make notes of that in the system. So if they say something to you about that, they're going to put it in the system so that the next time you enter, if you've been gone for a long period of time and you haven't been spending much time in the US, then they're going to be much more strict with you. Finally, I just wanted to touch upon getting citizenship. Now, you're eligible for citizenship after you've had a green card for 5 years. And it's based on the date that's on the actual green card, not the approval notices, this other stuff. They look at the date on the green card. So count out 5 years from the date on that first conditional green card you get, and that's theoretically the earliest date you can apply for citizenship. Why do I say theoretically? Because, well, first of all, it's dependent on you not having any kind of serious crimes or stuff like that, paying your taxes as you're required. But the biggest challenge sometimes for clients is out of that 5-year period, you need to physically be in the US for 2.5 years. And so if you're spending a lot of time overseas, you might not be able to apply within that 5-year period. But again, assuming you're spending most of your time in the US, 5 years from the time of the initial conditional green card, you can file for citizenship. Your ability to file for citizenship is totally independent between your family members because, even if your children are minors, whether they're eligible or not is independent of whether the parents are eligible. So if the parents are spending, too much, time traveling, maybe the kids might be able to even file sooner rather than the parents, or vice versa. So everybody files independently of each other for the citizenship. This brings to a conclusion module number 4 about the EB-5 program. Again, if you've missed any of the previous ones, you should have access in the links in the description below. And in our closing module, I wanted to talk about the EB-5 program and the new Gold Card program that Trump has come out, to compare the two to see which one might be more relevant or better for you, and why we feel strongly as to what is the better option for our clients to go forward with if they were to choose between these two options. So again, check out the link below in order to proceed to the next module. And if you have any questions about the EB-5 process or any information I've provided, please reach out to us directly so I or somebody from my staff can assist you in taking the next steps forward with your American dream.